includes balance, maintainability, palatability, family friendliness, sustainability, along with healthfulness. And you'll see the top overall diet is the Mediterranean diet. That's because it is easy to follow and offers a healthy eating lifestyle. It emphasizes simple plant-based cooking, focuses more on eating less red meat, as well as sugar, saturated fats, and eating more foods that are high and rich in omega-3 fatty acids, such as fish and olive oil. The next diet, two diets, the flexitarian and the DASH diet, those both emphasize whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and plant-based proteins. And then the fourth, coming in as best overall diet, is Weight Watchers. But to note, the Weight Watchers diet is considered the first in ranking of best weight loss diets. So a lot of people that I see do tend to point to the Weight Watchers program as being one that they've had success with. This next slide just goes over those, let's see, top 35 best weight loss diets. And a lot of times what people feel is that dieting, they look at it as a kind of a jump start to weight loss, as a way to get rid of a lot of processed carbs, added sugars, saturated fats, but at the same time, those quick weight loss diets, those usually emphasize some drastic cut in nutrients or elimination of an entire food group, and that's something that cannot be maintained over long periods of time. Typically, when the diet stops, the weight comes back on, typically at higher levels, and then initially at the start of the diet, and that's what's called yo-yo dieting. It's your body's response to dieting. So I'm not sure how many of you are dieting at this time, but asking yourself, looking at the diet that you are following and looking to avoid extremes in your diet approach. So fiber intake, is it too much fiber too fast? And that can lead to things like bloating, constipation, gas, other things. Is the diet you're following too low in calories? That's typically not one that you can continue for very long. Same being with liquid or semi-solids. Those tend to be less filling, and so people feel hungry sooner and they tend to snack. So it leads to kind of that cheating mentality. Other drawbacks to dieting, considering prep time, and then just overall sustainability, is this a diet that you can stick to for 3 to 6 months, a year, or even longer? Sorry, I am just hearing some feedback. I'm not sure if it's on my side or where that's coming from, but so here are some signs that maybe your plan isn't working. You feel more tired with dieting, or you struggle with that constipation, diarrhea, heartburn. You don't like the options given you, and then you find yourself cheating, making post-diet plans. You struggle to eat with others or eating out, so there's kind of a social barrier while dieting. And then you typically have a decrease in endurance or strength. I've heard a lot that the amount of time to plan or prep food can be time consuming. So things to also consider, some symptoms of like a diet backlash. So after you stop dieting, typically most people end up going on some kind of food binge, and after that they feel guilty, right? Or you end up having little trust with yourself and food. You may tend to feel like you don't deserve to eat because you feel like you're overweight. Your metabolism is more sluggish, and a lot of people end up using caffeine or other stimulants to kind of survive throughout the day. And this approach, dieting, is very, there's a kind of a counter approach that most dietitians take to or adopting principles on, and that's the idea of intuitive eating. And with extreme dieting, with long history of dieting, that intuitive eating or your intuitive eating kind of gets buried, right? So um, when you when you are binge eating, or you're constantly preoccupied with food, or you're constantly having feelings of deprivation or a sense of failure, decreased sense of willpower, those tend to drown out your own body's ability to intuitively eat and know what your body needs and to respond to hunger cues. So a lot of times it is starting kind of learning to break down that diet mentality and learn to heal your relationship with food and with your body. So if you're cycling in and out of diets, you're weighing and measuring food, you're tracking calories, all that's not working. Most people come to the end of the rope when they come to see us, as in they realize diets don't work, but they don't really know what the alternative would be. People associate dieting with eating healthy, which is a mindset that can be dangerous. So like I said, it is important to heal that relationship with food in your body. And to do that, it's important to ask yourself, why am I on this diet? A lot of times I like this point, question the question. So you may ask yourself, or a clinician, how do I lose weight? I think by questioning the question, you're asking yourself, why do I even want to lose weight, right? So understanding the real reason behind that weight loss, and that's going to affect motivation in making lifestyle changes. A lot of people, ultimately what it comes down to is they just don't like the way their body looks, right? They have negative body image of themselves. So understanding that your body is not your masterpiece, and learning to make peace with who you are, where you are in your life, learn how to care for yourself. All those things, if you're doing, the mention of weight should be on the back burner, right? It's not off the table, it's just on the back burner. I've heard a mother say, she came to the realization that her body, she recognized that her body has done some amazing things, and it continues to do amazing things. And she learned that loving her body was way more powerful than hating her body. And that was the first step she needed to take in order to heal that relationship. So once you ask yourself those tough questions, like the why behind it all, then it's important to also understand the what. So what is your relationship with food like? Perhaps you've used food as an emotional crutch in your childhood, and that developed into unhealthy coping mechanisms into adulthood. So that, on top of natural aging and slowing metabolism, I think majority of people, that's what it kind of comes to later in life. And you could very well be in a situation where you're unhappy with food, and it's not enjoyable. So understanding that food is not a moral issue. I really appreciate this sentiment. Food isn't a moral issue, meaning you're not a bad person if you eat a cookie, and you're not a good person if you eat a salad. So a lot of people kind of conflate those two, and again, it's kind of a dangerous mindset that's not healthy, and it doesn't help you make those changes. Understanding also that learning a new skill takes time. It's okay to make mistakes, and if you do make mistakes, understanding like, okay, I fell off the bandwagon, right? So what am I going to do to get back on, right? So not quitting, not giving up, understanding that's going to be a normal part of the process. So essentially, it's progression and not perfection. So a lot of people have to reconcile this idea of these extreme ideologies. And what I mean by that is they want to lose the weight for good reasons, for healthy reasons. They want it to improve health outcomes, or they want to have longevity and an active lifestyle with their children. But at the same time, they don't want to have to lose the weight because they're being told that they're beautiful the way they are. In a sense, that's true, but I think that there is a kind of a balance that needs to be reconciled. And a way to do that is to first quit out negative self-talk. That's one of the most damaging things people do to themselves, is that negative self-talk. So slow progress. When you do make a healthy food choice or any kind of healthy choice, um, really be excited for yourself, instead of beating yourself up when you make unhealthy choice. So have the focus be on your accomplishments, the successes, in following up with your goals and reaching your goals. Um, of course, we can always bring and for those who are interested, you can go into way more depth with this concept of intuitive eating. There's a fantastic book called Intuitive Eating that most dietitians have read, and again take pieces, kind of use that in their practice. But one of the last points it mentions is that we can bring a gentle awareness to what healthier choices are, while at the same time unlearning the list of do's and don'ts and cans or cannots. We tend to view nutrition as black or white, good or bad, and to be honest, it's much more evolved than that. So in order to eat to feel your best, dietitians will typically go through some of these nutrition fundamentals. So you have your choose my plate method as a way to kind of visualize nutrition. We talk about meal timing and snacks, mindful eating, meal planning, along with hydration, physical activity, and most importantly, goal setting. So I'm not sure, again, how many of you are familiar with Choose My Plate. It replaced the My Pyramid several years ago. I think back in 2010, actually. So it's been out for some time. But it's, again, a really good visual for on how to kind of visualize your plate and what good nutrition looks like. The emphasis is on a variety of foods in your diet. The more variety, the better. That's pretty it's safe to say in nutrition. So you'll see half of the plate are made up of fruits and vegetables. With fruits and vegetables, I mean, fruit specifically, we do want to focus on whole fruits. You can do any kind of canned, fresh, frozen, dried, but whole typically has more fiber than, let's say, juice, even if it's 100% juice. And some ways you can include more fruit, vegetables in your meals. You could enjoy fruit as a snack or as a dessert. Vegetables, you can choose, like, you can have a salad, obviously. You can have it as a side, your main side dish, or even finding ways to include it in your main dishes. So the idea with vegetables is to vary your vegetables, and choose a variety of colorful vegetables specifically. And on top of that, looking at how you're preparing it. So steaming, sauteing, roasted, or just eating them raw, as opposed to frying or other methods. With the grain group, we'll encourage making half of your grains whole grains. This does not mean that you only have to eat 100% whole wheat, or like whole wheat bread, or wheat pasta, brown rice, but really like selecting, I prefer white pasta, but I'm willing to eat more brown rice or wild rice. So just kind of learning, like, I don't only have to do, wheat products, but again, making half of the grains that you're eating more whole grains. With protein, you'll see it's a quarter of your plate. Vary your protein routines. So a lot of people have it in their mind that meat is the only protein, and that's the only way that they can feel satisfied and get enough protein. But there are plenty of other foods that have protein in them. So mixing up like seafood, beans and peas, unsalted nuts, seeds, soy products, eggs, in addition to those lean poultry and meats. That's going to be really helpful to your overall health. With dairy, Choose My Plate typically recommends low-fat, fat-free options. My piece of advice is to kind of find that balance, that moderation. So if you want fat-free milk, it's not an issue to be 2%, but maybe the yogurt, and I'm sorry, there's been feedback, so people can hear audio. That would help. Choosing between, maybe I'm gonna do a low-fat cottage cheese, and then I'm gonna do like a 2% or even whole milk, right? So the research is kind of out on that. But overall, the idea is to eat less sodium, saturated fats, and sugars. And this is where learning how to read nutrition facts labels, which is something that we're not going to get in today, can be really important. And it's something to maybe look up on your own time. Okay. So again, nutrition fundamentals. When it comes down to nutrients in your body, you can break it down into what we call macronutrients. Most everyone has heard are familiar with what macronutrients are. So you've heard of fat, protein, carbohydrates, and then there are also micronutrients. So those vitamins and minerals. So fats kind of get a bad rap. There are several different kinds of fats. You have trans fat, and that there is actually no safe level of consumption. So most manufacturers have banned the use of using trans fat in manufacturing. There's the next step up would be saturated fats. These are going to be fats that are typically solid at room temperature. And I like to think of saturated fats as the in-between fat, right? So most people look at trans fat and saturated fats as both being bad fats. Saturated fats is a little bit in between. It really depends on recommendations are to limit saturated fats to less than 10% of your daily calories. But I think what's more important, the research is showing it's more important what you're choosing to replace those fats with. So if you're replacing them with, with refined sugars, carbs, simple sugars, simple carbs, that can actually increase risk of heart disease and other chronic diseases, versus if you were to replace saturated fats with more of those good fats, that can actually decrease those risks that I previously mentioned. And then other types of fats, typically known as like good fats, those are going to be found in vegetables, nuts, seeds, fish. So it breaks it down into monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. You may have heard of like MUFAs and PUFAs. Monounsaturated fats, it lists their food sources: olive oil, peanut oil, canola oil, avocados, most nuts. Those are all really good sources of monounsaturated fats. And then polyunsaturated fats. These fats are actually considered essential fats, so something that need to be supplied by the diet. And most people are familiar with like omega-3 fatty acids, perhaps omega-6 as well. And again, it lists food sources on here. So omega-3s can be found in a lot of fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, as well as seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, as well as canola oil and unhydrogenated soybean. With omega-6, again, it lists food sources there. I think some people have said, or may be aware that they may have heard that omega-6 you want to limit or avoid those because they can be pro-inflammatory. What the research shows is that they don't necessarily need to be avoided, but what's more important is that you want to improve that ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 by adding more omega-3 fatty acids to your diet. So adding like flaxseed, chia seed to like a morning oatmeal or a smoothie, or to a salad. Eating more salmon, walnuts, those are all things that we can do to add more omega-3s to your diet. And just to clarify, this percentage, 20 to 35%, this is based on the AMDR, which stands for an acceptable macronutrient distribution range for adults. these are general recommendations for the general population. Obviously, more research is being done to see like maybe some individuals need more fat in their diet or more protein, more carbohydrate, depending on how you metabolize those nutrients. But typically, the amount of fat that you're eating should be around 20 to 35% of your calories.
Diana, you have a few questions on the chat. Maybe Sadie can read those to you. You can answer some of those before we start moving on.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing those, but let me see if I can
I
pull
think
that up.
Sadie knows where it is. She was going to be in charge of that. Is that true,
Okay.
Sadie?
Oh, of
Yeah.
course.
Thank you.
So we have a question that was back about my plate, and it was, what is the grain percentage on the plate?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, really, I would just look at it as any kind of grain or carbohydrate source you're kind of limiting to about a quarter of your plate. So, the protein, the grains are going to be about a quarter. So I know it looks a little lopsided, but typically American diet it's more heavy on grains, so people tend to eat closer to half or even three-quarter of a plate as being a source of grains. So limiting it to about a quarter plate, maybe a little bit more, that's going to be an appropriate portion size.
And then our next question is canola oil, well, that this person read that recently that canola oil is not good for you. Is there any research on this?
Um, I think it probably depends on how it was manufactured. Honestly, I'm not sure the answer to that, but I can definitely look it up and get back to whoever asked the question. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, canola oil are good sources of mono as well as polyunsaturated fats. So typically you'll use canola oil with cooking, and that's going to be preferred fat to like butter or margarine. So, but I can definitely look up more information on that after the presentation.
Excellent. And then we have another participant who asked, how does using essential fatty acid supplements fall into this? Do they usually work?
Yeah. So any kind of supplements. Honestly, I think most dietitians would agree with me when I say that um, we want you to be getting your nutrition from food first. But if these food sources are not typically ones that you enjoy eating or you can eat a lot of, then definitely supplementing with a fish oil supplement is not a bad idea. I would be careful with looking at dosages on those supplements. Again, I would steer more towards whole foods rather than supplements. Yeah.
Okay, we have two more questions. The next one is, where do peanuts stand on fat scale?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't, I don't know the exact like how much fat are in peanuts versus other nuts. Typically, um, again, that's something that I can look up. I apologize for that, but typically with any kind of nuts, you want to pay attention to the portion sizes. So when I'm looking at the package, it'll say like a quarter cup of nuts is one serving, and when you're reading the nutrition facts labels, that's where you can kind of see the breakdown. Like you can compare peanuts to walnuts, and that'll be more telling as far as like how much fat are in like a serving of peanuts versus walnuts.
Thank you. And the last question is, potatoes, are they considered a grain on my plate?
Yeah, so potatoes are considered a starchy vegetable. So, depending on if you are someone that has diabetes, they tend to lump kind of potatoes, corn, and peas in that kind of grain, like limiting it to like the grain on the my plate. So you're limiting portions with those, but typically, no, most individuals don't need to. They can group it more with vegetables. if that makes sense.
Looks like we are good to move on. Thank you for answering those questions.
Yeah, of course. Okay. And yeah, I'm sorry. Again, I can't see the questions, so just interrupt me if there are more coming in.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Okay. The next macronutrient we're going to talk about are proteins. In parentheses, that should make up about 10 to 35% of calories in your diet. And different food sources will include meat, poultry, fish. Those are typically ones people automatically jump to. Other animal-based proteins are going to be egg products, or dairy. Excuse me. What people most often kind of neglect are more plant-based proteins. So those are going to be legumes, and that is kind of an umbrella statement for lentils, beans and peas, and soy products. So soy products, that can be tofu, tempeh, or edamame. Those are all soy products. Other plant-based proteins, nut butters, and seeds, as well as whole grains. So whole wheat bread or pasta, brown rice, quinoa. Those are going to be a source of protein. It's important to know that per serving, animal-based proteins do have more protein, but plant-based proteins offer more beneficial nutrients like fiber, B vitamins typically, and like phytonutrients. So it's a good idea to, again, vary your protein routine. And the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has they do have a position paper, because a lot of people are concerned that vegetarian diets or vegan diets, they're not getting enough protein. But if you are eating protein from a variety of plant foods throughout the course of the day, it will provide enough of those essential amino acids that your body needs. But that caveat with that is that you need to be meeting your caloric requirements. So you need to be eating enough calories to sustain that. And I don't know if I mentioned, so yeah, other benefits to eating plant-based proteins can help reduce risk of chronic diseases, ischemic heart disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, certain cancers, along with production manufacturing. It tends to be more environmentally stable or sustainable than animal-based proteins. So it's never a bad idea to eat more plants in your diet, which can be hard for a lot of people because it's a lot of kind of meat and potato diets, or heavy grain diets. So with carbohydrates, this is the last macronutrient. You'll see 45 to 65% of your calories should come from carbohydrate in the diet. And this is because carbohydrates are your main source of energy that your body uses. So the majority of what you're eating should be a carbohydrate. There are different kinds of carbohydrates. You have more simple carbohydrates. So those found in fruit, milk, those are going to be considered simple carbohydrates. And then also added sugars to any kind of products. And then you have more complex carbohydrates. So those are going to be found in legumes, whole grains, nuts, nut butters, and seeds. You'll see in here dietary fiber is a carbohydrate. It's considered a complex carbohydrate. Fiber is, again, kind of it's unique in that your body doesn't have the enzymes to digest it. So what it does is it passes through, but it's really healthy for your gut. So it doesn't digest, but the bacteria in your gut actually will digest fiber, and there's a lot of benefit from that. So with fiber and your health, there's a reason the MyPlate recommendations include making half your grains whole grains, half your plate fruits and vegetables, and then eating more plant-based proteins. This is all because those foods are going to be higher in fiber, and again, has a lot of extending health benefits that people don't realize, specifically with gut health, with heart health and also with helping to manage blood sugars and diabetes. So there are different, we can talk about fermentability versus viscosity. So a lot of people may be familiar with the difference between insoluble fibers and soluble fibers. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So insoluble fibers, what that means is that gut bacteria aren't able to digest those. So, and that's not a bad thing. It actually can be very helpful for constipation because what it does is increases water holding capacity. So essentially, it results in like a quicker intestinal transit time and in larger bulk volume. So it kind of softens up the stool. So that helps. Insoluble fibers tend to help with constipation. On the other hand, fermentable or soluble fibers, so those are really helpful for promoting healthy colonic bacterial growth. They tend to produce the bacteria tend to produce short chain fatty acids, which can be, again, really helpful for heart health. So, and typically, if you're experiencing a lot of diarrhea, the goal is to include more soluble fibers in your diet. Most soluble fibers will contain what we call viscous gel-forming fibers, so they'll be more gel-like, and this helps to delay gastric emptying, which has several benefits for like insulin secretion and lowering serum cholesterol, triglycerides. So again, overall, fiber is going to be heart healthy, help with diabetes management, and then gut health, which is starting to be linked to a number of chronic diseases. So specifically fiber with weight management, fiber-rich foods tend to have a lower energy density and higher volume, meaning for the volume, there's not as many calories, but there's more nutrients. So it kind of fills you up without giving you a ton of calories. It can also delay gastric emptying and or alternate digestive tract hormones that do modulate appetite. So a lot of people increase fiber as a way to help with weight management, but the research has shown inconsistent results with that. Overall, it's a good idea to add more fiber into your diet, though, for reasons I mentioned. It is important, though, as you increase fiber in your diet, you do drink more water, and that's going to help you prevent constipation. So typically, Americans are eating well below their fiber recommendations. For women, it's about 25 grams a day, and for men, it's about 38 grams a day, depending on your age range. But I think that's a kind of a goal to kind of aim for. So how does those macronutrients all kind of tie back into Choose My Plate? We talked about fats. So fats can be found in dairy. They can be found in the protein. So red meats tend to be higher in fat, but even like lean proteins like chicken, depending on if you're eating chicken with the skin, those can be high in fat. Vegetables, those it's typically vegetable oils, so those tend to be healthy oils. So fats can kind of be found throughout the My Plate method, but you do want to include more like certain kinds of fats more than others. So those healthy fats found more in the vegetable oils, those nuts and seeds and fish, as opposed to like a lot of red meat or whole milk dairies necessarily. Yeah, go ahead.
So the question we have is, what proportion should be dairy, or is it not really recommended?
It really depends. So it depends on like they'll have different recommendations for age ranges as well as like calorie goals. So if you're wanting to eat less, then obviously the number of servings of dairy you're having a day is going to be less. So if you want to find out kind of what fits for you, you can always refer to choosemyplate.gov, and I think it's and I can include this later in the notes. I think it's like My Plate method. But anyways, if you go to choosemyplate.gov, it'll actually take you to a place where you can find, for the calorie range that I'm looking for, based on my age, I should have X number of servings of dairy or of grains or of protein. So it can really help that way too. Sorry, did that answer that question?
They wrote somewhat.
Okay. And yeah, I can always talk individually after as well. I'll be staying behind to do that. Okay. And then protein, another macronutrient, that can be found in several food groups again. So most food groups, other than fruits, can have some degree of protein. Again, it's important to vary that protein routine, animal-based and plant-based proteins. With carbohydrates, the last macronutrient, those are going to be mainly found in fruits, grains, and dairy. Of course, all of this depends on, your food preparation methods and the recipes that you're using, but typically when you're looking at macronutrients and Choose My Plate, that's kind of a general overview of that. Okay, moving on to meal timing and snacks. We do typically recommend people eating 3 consistent meals a day and avoid skipping meals.
Anna, I'm sorry to bother you again, but there was one more question associated with the last thing we were talking about from Dan. He says, what about lactose and gluten intolerant people? Or is it underdiagnosed?
Yeah, so I mean, that gets into a whole nother subject, but if you're experiencing any intolerance with like uh, eating or drinking dairy products, typically the best thing you can do is find alternatives. So dairy-free options with milk, there's lactate. If you're wanting to do an alternative milk, soy milk is going to be your best alternative because it has more protein, again, per serving. So it's comparable to milk. Um, but some people with lactose intolerance can tolerate small amounts of dairy. It just depends on kind of a trial and error. Like you may be able to tolerate small amounts of yogurt or hard cheeses, and it may just be like ice cream or soft cheeses or just plain milk that you need to avoid. So that's some kind of detective work on your part to figure out what's kind of triggering symptoms for you. As far as gluten intolerances go, that's a hot topic of debate. It's kind of an extensive process to go through diagnosing yourself as gluten intolerant or celiac. And typically, though, if you find yourself, feeling better eating gluten-free products, like you feel like those symptoms that you're experiencing are less after eating gluten-free products, then limiting those and limiting more wheat, barley, rye, and adding more gluten-free products back into your diet. But again, it's kind of an individual basis as far as your ability to tolerate certain levels, certain doses, certain portions of those foods. I will say with gluten-free, it's not all it's chalked up to be. A lot of those products tend to be higher in fat and higher in sugar to make up for not having wheat. So gluten-free isn't the answer necessarily, but if you do feel like any symptoms you're experiencing, if you go off of gluten and you feel better, that might be an easier solution than going through the hoops of, diagnosing yourself as I have a gluten intolerance or I have celiac. So it just depends on, how far you want to go into it. Okay. So continuing on with meal timing, it is a good idea to have 3 consistent meals for several reasons. Most people that I will visit with are eating 1 to 2 meals, and what they end up seeing is that they are eating. They feel like that's fine. 2 meals might be enough, and they feel satisfied. But what they don't realize is the number of snacking that's happening throughout the day, or maybe, they're eating larger portions at those meals to make up for not eating another meal, or that may tend to lead towards like late night snacking. So really understanding, becoming aware of, am I actually snacking, or am I really only eating 1 to 2 meals? And the only real way to do that is to track your intake, because again, what you think you're doing may not necessarily be the reality. But with consistent meal times and avoiding grazing or snacking necessarily, that can kind of help you to relearn those like hunger cues, hunger satiety cues that your body naturally has. So yeah, and it can help with like on here, what are the benefits? Helps with head hunger. So there's a difference between physical hunger and head hunger. Most of us, when we're snacking, grazing, we tend to eat out of head hunger, meaning it's more out of like emotional eating or social eating or something else that kind of triggers us to want to eat. Um, another benefit with eating consistent meals is, especially with those with diabetes or pre-diabetes, it does help to control blood sugars, keep those levels a little bit more steady throughout the day. This avoid grazing. This is pretty common with most people just because they have snacks constantly available. Um, so keeping prepared snacks. There may be times when you're not able to eat a meal and it's better to eat a snack than a meal. There's a difference between snack and grazing though. So always keeping a prepared snack. So in case you need to skip a meal, you can eat a snack instead. Preferably, the snack would include fiber and a protein. But if you're someone that is having a hard time with grazing throughout the day, a rule that I like to recommend is following a 20-second rule. So keeping foods that are traditionally easy access, things that may not be the healthiest options, keeping those at least 20 seconds away from you. So it kind of requires you or forces you to kind of get up and make some effort to go get them. And on the flip side, keeping healthier snack options, especially those with fiber and protein, closer to you, so that you're more likely to want to grab something that's easier if you're looking for a snack. Does that make sense? Okay. Another really important component to nutrition is mindful eating. And I mean, if you're needing a snack, like if you're eating 3 consistent meals and you're still needing a snack in between, one piece of advice is, if before you go to eat something, always ask yourself, am I physically hungry? And if not, why do I want to eat? And that really can bring an awareness to, am I wanting to eat out of emotion, as in I'm sad, I tend to eat when I'm sad, I tend to eat when I'm stressed or when I'm bored. I talked a little about this idea of intuitive eating. So the intuitive eater, someone who can intuitively eat, eats when they're physically hungry. So this person will make food choices without experiencing any kind of guilt or any kind of ethical dilemma. So they're honoring their hunger. That's a big part of intuitive eating. And they're also respecting fullness. So they're not overeating, binging. And that ultimately will lead you to enjoy eating, right? Enjoy the pleasure of eating. With mindful eating, understanding how your body communicates to you. Um, Also being aware, when did I eat last? What did I eat last? Again, like I kind of mentioned, why am I eating, and what do I want? Kind of what are those cravings that I want? This scale can be really helpful when you're starting to kind of starting to be more conscious of that during the day. So you're trying to eat more consistently throughout the day, but you still feel like you're struggling with it. Again, you want to learn to start eating. It's kind of a scale of 0 to 10, right? So typically we want you to start eating around a 3 and then stop eating around a 7. So 7 is when you feel satisfied. You could eat more, but you know that how much you've eaten will carry you over till the next meal. And 3 is when you're hungry, you know you're going to need to eat something soon, but you're not to the point where you're like kind of anxious and like and kind of desperate to start eating. So finding those sweet spots of when to start and stop eating can be really helpful with weight maintenance and just learning to kind of dial back and relearn those skills of intuitive eating. With meal planning, this is probably this is another really hard thing for people, just because it does take time to plan, to shop, prepare the food to eat and clean up. So finding ways to simplify the process is going to be really important, especially starting out. So if that means doing takeout, to start off with, finding healthier restaurants, but takeout is not a bad thing if you can afford it. Other ways to simplify the process, though, always having prepared snacks, right? So those are some things that you can easily kind of set aside snacks in bulk that you can grab and go. Also doing like easy, quick meals, frozen meals. So there's meal services out there that will help you prepare frozen meals, and one that I've used recently that I really enjoy is Citrus Pear. And I do have a 1-year old, so it's been a transition, a change, and I will say having those frozen meals available to eat when I need them has been really helpful. Um, other tips: finding recipes that have fewer portions and adjust the recipes, just because you're not going to be. A lot of people don't like having that many leftovers, or they don't want to have to make that much food. You can also buy pre-chopped products, like onions. Like I love doing pre-chopped vegetable options, or frozen vegetables, frozen meals. With shopping, finding those bulk sections can save money. And then if it's a matter of like, actually physically going grocery shopping, especially now with COVID, a lot of people are hesitant, timid to do that. So doing grocery pickup and delivery, I think most places are doing that for free right now. So taking advantage of that. And then one last tip that I really have started to do myself is more of this batch cook idea, where you're producing a lot of like plain grains, like you're producing a batch of rice and you're producing a batch of chicken, and then keeping that in the fridge, but then you can kind of repurpose those, plain grains or plain proteins into different kinds of meals. Um, with meal planning, also having pantry essentials stocked. So having keeping rice, keeping pasta on hand, or keeping even bread on hand, different proteins. So you have, red meats, you have poultry, you have fish, vegetables. Vegetables and produce is kind of a tricky area for a lot of people. But if you're able to, when you do buy vegetables, prepare them as soon as possible, like chop them up so they're ready to go. Or like I said, buy pre-chopped produce. That can also really help. But if you're keeping grains, proteins, vegetables stocked, it's really easy to kind of forage through through your fridge, and kind of repurpose those things and kind of get creative with flavor combinations. And if you do a simple Google search for flavor combinations on, for Mexican dishes or for Indian dishes or whatnot, you'll come up with several results. Another tip with meal planning: starting with a top 10 list of easy meals and snacks, and kind of, over time, as you get more comfortable with the process, adding on. But I will use cookbooks, magazines, Pinterest to find recipes that I want to try out. There are tons of apps that you can, both free and paid for, that can help with recipe and also translating that into a grocery list. So if using an app can be really helpful, you may consider doing that. And then with meal preparation, look ahead at the week. So ask yourself, do you have time to cook, or do you maybe have some late night meetings? You're working late, or maybe early mornings that you need to have some on-the-go meal options. Really kind of understanding your week and what that looks like. A lot of people find it overwhelming to have to meal prep like breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the week. Myself, that's the situation. So what I'll do is I will kind of think ahead and prep dinners for the week. And then the night before, I will look at, what do I want to eat for breakfast and lunch the next day? And what do I need to pull from my freezer? Or what do I need to kind of get ready so that the next day it's easy? I know what I'm eating, and kind of keep it simple that way. Another thing is like if it's not easy or feasible to kind of bring lunches to work, understanding what restaurants are around your area, what are some kind of better choice restaurants, and then what are some entrees that you can consider ordering. So knowing ahead what you'd order from which restaurant can really help you instead of when time comes to you're in that crunch and you're going to kind of default to what um, you know, uh, what sounds best, but may not leave you feeling the best. Hydration. This is really again important with it ties with nutrition, and fluid needs do vary. So typically we have a goal of about 64 ounces a day. That's about 8 cups a day, and I'm sure most of you have heard that. But again, when you're getting to the habit of eating consistent meals, and when you go to, eat, asking yourself, am I physically hungry? If not, follow up with why do I want to eat? It's always a good idea to drink some water when you realize that you're not physically hungry but you're wanting to eat. So you follow up with drinking some water and then finding something else to go do that preoccupies your mind and ideally uses your hands, and that can help avoid unnecessarily eating when you don't need to.
So Brianna, we do
yeah.
have a few more questions. Are you open for them right now, or would you, it's almost 1:00.
Yeah, and I'm getting close. I'll kind of skim through the rest of the slides, but yes, what are the questions?
One person would like to know strategies to tackle large restaurant portions.
Oh, sure. Um, yeah, and I do have a really good handout on that I'm not sure if it's in this office or not. But some ideas for eating out, and the portions tend to be larger. Always, if you're going with people, sharing an entree. I do that myself. I'll say who wants to share an entree, and we'll kind of split it that way. Not being scared to ask for a to-go bag, or and setting aside right off the bat when it comes, setting aside half of your meal and putting it in the to-go bag, so that way you're not kind of tempted to continue eating. Those have really been helpful for me. Some restaurants ordering an appetizer is filling enough, or like not being scared to order like a kid size meal either. So those are some ideas off the top of my head, but I can always again look into that after the presentation.
Okay, we also have another one on, they heard that proteins, healthy fats, and high fiber foods will keep you feeling fuller longer.
Yes, yeah, and I didn't quite hear the last piece. I heard protein and fiber, and then what was the other?
Protein, fibers, hold on, let me get back up to it.
Oh no, you're fine.
Healthy fats, so proteins, healthy fats, and high fiber foods.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. If you're doing a protein, a fiber, and a healthy fat, that will help you feel full longer, especially eating consistent meals and you're eating appropriate portions. So not under eating with meals, not overeating, but learning to find that balance. Those will help you feel more satisfied after your meal, and that will help you kind of combat or prevent you from snacking in between meals or grazing. So, yep, that's exactly right.
And then there's one last question. Is there any way you could send us a sample meal prep week?
A sample meal plan for the week. That's what the question was. So we have, the Academy has a few kind of day sample meals, but no, we don't offer like meal plans with this clinic. Just because that kind of follows along that, again, that diet mentality where you're being told what to eat. I understand that it can be helpful to kind of learn and recognize, oh, this is what a good meal looks like. And I can provide links for like sample day meals, but yeah, as far as like meal plans, we don't do that here, unfortunately.
Great. Well, it's a little after 1. Would you finish what you're ready to do and what you have left, and then we'll call it a day. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I keep track of time here. So, talk about hydration, physical activity. It is underrated. It is important. It does change metabolic processes. So the more active you can be, the better. If you're someone that has chronic disease or issues, talking to your doctor, asking him what's appropriate for me and what am I, able to do. So start slow or start low, go slow, find something you enjoy doing. And then just kind of working up and not overextending yourself essentially with physical activity. But it is a very important part of a healthy lifestyle. Goal setting. This is, I mean, we're not going to get anywhere unless we set goals, unfortunately. So understanding what are your long-term goals and then setting some short-term goals in order to reach those long-term goals will be really important. This idea of SMART goals is just making your goals simple, measurable, attainable, having them be realistic, right? So if the goal for water intake is 64 ounces and you're drinking no water at this time, don't set a short-term goal of drinking 64 ounces, right? Start with maybe I'm going to drink 8 ounces, a glass of water every day, and then kind of build up to that. And then some different with tracking and weighing yourself. If this doesn't motivate you, you can take some time off, but I will say tracking is the number one way to realize gaps or inconsistencies or things that you can, or focus areas you can work on. So doing detective work, track progress and changes with, there's numerous ways to kind of track. You can do a journal, checklist. There are apps like MyFitnessPal, Lose It, Weight Watchers can help do that. But essentially, the key is to problem solve and kind of identify your own situation, be aware of your own situation. So these are just some examples of a checklist. My goal is to eat 3 to 5 servings of vegetables, and you have that like Sunday, Monday, and you can just check, oh, I did that. So that's great. And then signs that your plan's working, you feel satisfied after meals, you have increased energy, your sleep's better, and your clothes fit better. So the weight on the scale may not be any better, but your clothes may be looser or tighter. You're in a better mood, you have more strength, and it just feels more like it's a lifestyle rather than like a diet approach. So that is the end of this discussion. And again, I'm happy to stay a little bit after to answer or follow up with any questions that people have.
So if you would like to do that, you can just unmute yourself and ask her questions, or you're welcome to send your questions to Sadie May, and Sadie will be glad to send those to me. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Brianna. It was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, we can maybe just give it a couple of minutes. And again, if you want to send questions via email, I'm always happy to answer or respond to those emails. So I know with the webinar, this platform is a little bit difficult to ask those questions. So.
Do you find working at a hospital that the people that you deal with and the dietary problems are different than, say, the regular population?
I think I think the patient population in the hospital setting is definitely kind of a subset, but I think it reflects, a broader, you know, concern in the general population that nutrition is misunderstood and that we're not looking at nutrition as more of a preventative measure rather than a therapy, rather than dealing with the after effects and how can we, we're not really looking at as a way to prevent any of these chronic diseases or help improve lifestyle. It's kind of last resort when you're in a hospital setting. So
Yeah. Just my observation, I think there's a lot of suspicion over the food industry over the last 20 years because, with all the recommendations that have gone on about diet and such, the American public uh, has a lot more diet related diseases than, um, that they had, 40 years ago. I mean, the population's much more obese, sedentary. The uh, the kinds of foods that they eat are a lot worse than they used to be. So, and maybe
right.
that's the whole fast food industry and that whole thing.
Yeah, I think that it's a complex, complicated situation where we've gotten to. There's a lot of things that are kind of playing into it, but I think overall, yes, like lifestyle, we are more stressed. I think we're, quick convenience is our go-to. So, um, and that's not necessarily conducive to a lot of these healthy lifestyle changes. So learning to really take a step back and slow down in life and, reprioritize what's important is, I mean, that's the first thing that needs to happen before someone's willing to make any of those changes. But yeah, as far as like skepticism with, with nutrition or with, manufacturers, it is a growing science. It's a relatively young science, and we're continuing the research. I think it's only going to become more prevalent, nutrition, and especially in healthcare settings. And so yes, recommendations are constantly updating. I think that just reflects the more like the research and the data coming in. So the best we can do as clinicians is recommend based off of those evidence guidelines and make adjustments as needed. So
Right. I do think the Whole Foods movement was probably one of the best things that hit the nutrition industry in the last 30 years because um, it was a way of showing that nutrients are embedded in normal foods and not something that needed to be extracted, supplemented.
hmm
And a lot of refined foods were really not very good for you.
yeah,
And I think that's more than just an opinion. I think that the science has borne that out.
yeah, for sure. I think nutrition is obviously tied to agricultural production, and I think um, like you'll see a lot of pushback with more traditional large scale production, and realizing that that's we're able to feed a lot more people um, and have longer shelf life. These are all good things, but at the same time, the toll that it's taken on the environment or on our health is not necessarily worth, in my opinion, the advancements that have been made. So I think you're seeing a huge movement back to more like farm to table, where people are realizing, small scale farms focusing on diversifying plant production. I think that's huge, and I think that message is carrying over to nutrition and what we're putting in our body and how that affects us. So yeah, I think you're right on with that.
Yeah, sorry about all my questions and comments, but
No,
this is
no, it's
very
great.
interesting. And, we spend a third of our life engaged in this activity. So I think it's very timely.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. It is important. Yeah. Any other questions I can help answer?
I'm done. Thank you.
No, thank you for your input. I really appreciate it. All right. Let's see. Was it Sadie that Kim was talking to? I'm so sorry.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah. So what I think we'll do is we'll end this webinar, and then I can email you my work email, and if you have any questions coming in, forwarding those to me, I'd be happy to answer them. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much for staying after.
Yeah, of course. So I am going to go ahead and message you my work email, and yeah, I really appreciate everyone coming and attending. It's been good. I hope people got something out of it.
I definitely think they did, and I also put my email in the chat box too for your reference.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Hey. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting, but thank you all, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Brianna. You did a great job again. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Take care. Bye.